Right. So today we look into it's a third session for international relations and strategy, and today we will look global trade and financial institutions. Right. We keep hearing about institutions like WTO, GATT, etc. So we'll see how they came up and changed the global economy as such. Now, after the Second World War, the global economy was shaped. We saw all the world wars and the Cold War last in the last session. So, after the Second World War, the countries decided that they need to do more to enhance. Remember, there was a thought of school which said that if the trade is more strong between countries, there would be less chances of war and conflicts. So a lot of institutions came up, the exchange rates in between countries, they were developed. Right, there was the general agreement on tariffs and trade. World Trade Organization was found. International Monetary Fund, World Bank, they all came up after the Second World War. So this is what we are going to look in this particular session. So let's see, what is global political economy. Global political economy is an interdisciplinary field, dedicated to and understand the relationship or the dynamics between political power as well as the economic forces. So generally, there are subjects that study politics, there are subjects that study economics. Now, global political economy studies how they both together, what is the dynamics between the two, and how that shapes that shapes policies on a global scale. So so global political economy studies how global economic processes like trade, finance, production, they're all shaped by political decisions, government policies, and the distribution of power among different states. How powerful a state is, like, you're a developed country, underdeveloped, developing nation, all those things. And the non-state actors like United Nations are there, and we studied all the non-state actors in the last session, like United Nations are there, then multinational organizations are there, how they all shape the economic decisions. Global political economy also examines how the underlying economic structures and dynamic, of a state, of a country, and dynamics influence, how economic structures influence the political outcomes as well. So it's not just purely global political economy is neither purely economic nor purely political. It's again a mix of two, both. So that's it. So what is the role of international institutions? What are they and what is their role? So international institutions, as I said, like United Nations, World Bank, World Trade Organization, these are all the international institutions. They play a very important role in understanding, how complex the world is and the interconnected world, because the world is highly interconnected right now because of businesses and all across, people having businesses all across the world. So the world is highly interconnected, and it's not just it uh, international institutions are not just institutions that look for trade. They also, they are, you can call them the architects of global order. They facilitate cooperation, they mitigate risks, and also provide frameworks for for states, which are necessary for states to interact peacefully with different countries, between different peacefully with each other. So, first role is crucial for managing cross-border flows and resolving disputes. So, the present world is characterized by a humongous volume and velocity of cross-border interactions. You know, the businesses, or there's hardly any business that is not interacting with a different country. Even if there's a wholesaler of nuts and bolts in India, in a small city in India, say, they still have, their suppliers from somewhere across the border. So the world is, there's a huge velocity of cross border interactions. So without a star, and that is on a small scale. Now, if you go, the bigger the institution, more cross-border interactions happen between between countries and organizations. So without having established international institutions, these flows, the flow. So the flow is of goods, services, and of finances, capital. There could be disputes, and these disputes could not be solved easily, which could in turn lead to conflict. So, they're very crucial. Managing cross border flows like trade and investment. For example, World Trade Organization sets rules for international trade. Which aims to reduce the tariffs and also the non-tariff barriers. It aims to promote fair competition and manage trade disputes among involved parties. So it prevents it, prevents it. It protects involved parties and prevents from having disputes which might escalate into more critical issues. There are also institutions like IMF and World Bank that facilitate financial flow of capital and other financial instruments, and they provide financial stability to the states, which is very important for cross-border investment and economic development of countries. There are also organizations like International Organization for Migration (IOM) that look into the complexities or regarding the issue of global migration. Right, when people are migrating from one state country to the other. Now, country and states in this particular subject are used, interchangeably. So if I say state, it means country again. Right. So we also have International Telecommunication Union. It helps manage the global radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits, important for communication and data flow. We do need, good communication and data flow system because we are doing businesses with people across the world. Then there are bodies like United Nations Environmental Program, and there have been conferences and conventions like the Paris Agreement, which are very important for managing the environmental issues. Cross border environmental issues like climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, etc. Now, international institutions are peaceful resolution mechanisms as well. They provide established forums, they're established forums and mechanisms for countries to, air their grievances and resolve disputes without resorting to force or war, etc. For example, there's the International Court of Justice, which resolves legal disputes between the countries. And then there's the Security Council of the United Nations, which addresses threats to, on a higher level, threats to international peace and security. Then there's World Trade Organization, which looks after the disputes of trade disputes. World Trade Organization also has a dispute settlement body which allows the member countries to resolve trade related disputes. So these are some of the, how cross border movement or cross border flows can be resolved with international institutions. Now, international institutions also address uh, collective action problems and foster cooperation. So most of the uh, uh, pressing global challenges, many are collective action problems where individual countries acting in their own self-interest cannot achieve an optimal outcome. They have to cooperate with each other. If there is, say, a climate change issue, countries have to cooperate with each other. Or if there's inflation, or there are rising costs, or there's a lack of some minerals, so they have to work together to solve the issue. And that's where international institutions help in the whole situation. They define collective action problems, so there are institutions where a common good can be achieved, uh, you know uh, by but every actor, like every state, has to participate. It cannot be like one party is or one state or one country is contributing and the other is not helping. For example, I said climate change mitigation, or preventing pandemics, or maintaining global financial stability. So everyone has to, it's a collective action problem. Every country has to work towards it. So institutions provide forums where the countries or the states, they can meet regularly and discuss these issues, share information with each other. And the sharing information always builds trust among people, and they can negotiate and come up with agreements. We see people coming up with agreements every now and then. So that's just part of it. Now, without these spaces, without these events happening, it would be very difficult to develop cooperation. Now, these institutions also help establish shared rules and regulations and standards to guide the behavior of countries or states. For example, there's International Civil Aviation Organization. It sets standards for air safety. Now, these standards are recognized by all the countries. Okay, that's how this institution helps for that. So it sets standards for air safety, making air travel more safe and accessible. Then there's while international law can also be challenging to enforce, right? So institutions also play a role in helping countries, in monitoring the compliance and helping countries enforce these rules and regulations. Now, these institutions also allow states to pool financial and human resources so as to tackle common challenges more effectively. For example, World Health Organization, it coordinates global health responses from globally. It will take information about health issues and then share expertise with everyone to combat diseases. Now, the final role is provide predictability and stability, reduce uncertainty, and if you have predictability and stability, which in turn reduces uncertainty and protectionism. So, the world is changing very rapidly, and unforeseen events can happen. We have seen, like, we had COVID all of a sudden happening. There could be trade wars when new political regimes come. Technology is changing very fast. So these changes keep on happening. And so in such situations, these international institutions serve as anchors for stability, okay, which is very important. Stability is important for economic growth and overall global security as well. So these international institutions create a framework of international law, treaties, norms, and it helps in they help establish the rule based international order. So no one can function the do whatever they wish to. There are rules and regulations which all the member states of a particular institution have to follow. So states behavior is governed by these principles, and these principles are agreed upon. So initially all the member parties of a particular institution agree upon these principles. That's why it has come into action. Now businesses and investors also thrive on they thrive on predictability. They need to. So international institutions provide rules for trade, finance, intellectual property rights. These rules and regulations reduce uncertainty, right? And that helps international businesses to thrive and function easily. Now, in the absence of if there are no international institutions, states might be inclined to act unilaterally, right? That's what I said. The rules and regulations also help the states to, they have to act in a certain way. They cannot act unilaterally. So these institutions help in that. Now, institutions are often as first responders. They also act as first responders and coordinates during a crisis, like the financial crisis of the 2008, where there was a financial depression. IMF played a key role in that. Then there were humanitarian crises happening during wars, health related crises like pandemic. So the institutions are first responders because they have a lot of information. They also have support from all the member states, so they have more resources. So they're generally the first responders. They have the set rules and regulations and structures and network, which help, which allows them or facilitates them to be more quick, in responding to such situations. Now, the regular interaction within the institutional framework. So, the states in these particular international institutions interact regularly. That helps in building trust among the member states and also confidence in each other. So that strengthens the relationship among states. So international institutions also help in building a long term relationship among the states. So right, so this is what the role of international institutions is. So they're not just an optional extra, but they are the foundational elements of a more independent world to function, a complex world to function. They address the challenges of cooperation, managing disputes, etc. Okay, so that is what. Let's see what is the historical trajectory of global trade, how global trade came into being. We look into the evolution of global trade. So the history of global trade reveals that there were distinct patterns of integration and fragmentation, and influenced by technology, politics, and economic development. So before 1800, the international trade volumes were very low. People were only doing trade within their national boundaries. There was not much cross-border trade before 1800s. And the whatever international trade was happening was very low and hardly passing, was very low, you can say that, right? So during this period, flows of goods between empires, there were empires at that time, and their colonies constituted a significant portion of international trade, driven by colonial endeavors. So the colonies and the people who were ruling them, they only did the trade. They extracted resources from a colony and send it across to their own the empire country or the major country. For example, Britain was ruling India, so they would take out resources from India and send it to Britain. So earlier, that before 1800, that was the major trade, cross border trade, that happened. Now, when 19th century came, then we had the first wave of globalization. There were growth, there was the world trade grew because there were technological advancements, more technology came up, like transportation. There were because of development in transportation, the cost of transferring goods from one state or one country to another reduced drastically. Okay. So for so that was during the for 19th century. So there was also an increase in goods across national borders. People were open now. People were ready to send goods between different countries, from one place to another. They were open to trade. For example, there was trade between European countries and North American countries, North American colonies. So the trade opened. It was not just from the colonies to the ruler, but ruling state, but also from the ruling state to the colony. So it was started. That was the first. After the First World War, that was the globalization. Then we had the interwar period. Interwar period was the period between World War One and World War Two. So after the initial wave of globalization, it was not very well sustained, right? There were disruptions happening, between this between the cross border business. And and after World War One, remember, there was this liberal thought, liberalism, right? After the World War One, that whole thought of liberalism, economic liberalism, collapsed and nationalism rose. So that also contracted international trade. People were more like, we are going to use goods made in our own country. We are not going to share our culture with other people. So after World War One, sometime after the First World War ended, this liberalism collapsed and nationalism was rising, and that contracted the international trade. So this is called the interwar period. So it saw a rapid collapse in global international trade. So it was marked by protectionist policies. There were policies, competitive devaluations, and a threat from international cooperation. People had policies to protect themselves. They did not want to collaborate with each other or cooperate with each other, like each other meaning between countries. Cooperation and collaboration between countries was drastically reduced, which obviously affected the economy, and a lot of bitterness happened between countries. So that happened. Now, so the policymakers were really concerned because there was economic isolation. Now, when countries were not interacting with each other, they were not cooperating, which means there was very less trust. The relationship was weak. So they were, the countries were on the verge of economic isolation. They would all be, in their own silos, the countries, and there would be problems economically. So, with this distinct ways of integration and then periods of profound disintegration, global economic integration was not, immutable. It was a linear progression. Slowly, it went over there. So, this was what happened in the interwar period. Now, we look into the post World War II liberalization and the multilateral impulse, the second wave of globalization, right? So after the Second World War, international trade again grew. So why did Second World War happen? Because there was huge nationalism. People were obviously not trusting each other. The liberalism failed, and nationalism was very high, and which gave way to World War II. So people realized that even nationalism does not help and does not stop war. So after that, there was liberalization again. The international trade routes started opening. So there was a resurgence of international trade after the Second World War, which is called the second wave of globalization. Uh, so at this, during this period after the Second World War, international trade, started at a very unprecedented pace. And generally, many a times the global economic output was, the global trade was, it outpaced the global economic output. So the total volume of merchandise exports from non-communist countries, remember the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, so the non-communist countries, which is the Eastern Bloc, grew by a remarkable, 290% between 1948 and 1968. So they were exporting a lot of goods. So this expansion was facilitated by, reduction in the transaction costs of international trade was reduced between countries. So it grew at a fast pace. Then there was telephone for communication improved because there was telephone to communicate. People could communicate with between cross borders. So that improved the global trade. Now, it also evolved because of technology. So that's what the communication improved. Then shipping technology improved. There were more ways to send goods cross borders. So there were a lot of enabling technologies. So the nature of trade, the way trade happened, also changed from inter-trade business to inter-industry trade to intra-industry trade. So we'll see what it is. The first wave of globalization was uh, inter-industry, where countries exported goods very different from what they imported, right? For example, England exchanged machines with Australia, and in turn took wool from Australia. So they were very different between industries. The trade was happening between very, very different industries. Now, in the second wave of, you'll say, international trade, it was an intra-industry trade. So, for example, France imported and exported machines from Germany, and Germany and so between like France and Germany imported and exported machines from each other. So this was intra-industry. Similar goods and services were being exchanged. That's what it means. So this was significant. This particular shift in trade type was significant because it increased the scope of specializations through exchange of intermediate goods, fostering more complex and integrated global supply chains. So the supply chains also started developing. They had to be more integrated in understanding the requirements of the between the two trading partners. So this is what happened, the shift of trade types. After this shift and etc., when business started growing, there was an emergence of a rule based trading system. So people were trading, but there was a requirement to have a rules and regulations in this trading. So that's what it came up after that. So after the Second World War, policymakers were like, they recognized that international trade is important for economic growth. You cannot work in your own silos. So, or you cannot be isolated from the world, and the protectionist policies which protected the country from other countries, business with business from other countries, was not good enough. So they understood that the change has to be made. There were conferences, like there was the Bretton Woods conference. We in 1944 we look into it. It focused on monetary affairs, right? For only on monetary affairs and the critical importance of liberalization of trade and open payment system, etc. So it emphasized that there was a need for a robust institutional oversight to prevent, same economic problems that happened before, the instability that happened before. Now, United States played a important role here. Remember, United States was not very. It did emerge as a strong power after the Second World War and the First World War, but it stayed a little away from the global, global trade and global matters and the dynamics of global politics. It was not fully involved until the Cold War started, right? So it plays a pivotal role in force. Remember, the League of Nations also collapsed because United States was not a part of it. But United States eventually understood its power, and it played a important role in fostering, in bringing this era of trade liberalization, wherein the countries, the states, they traded with each other. So there was something called a Marshall Plan Aid, wherein it provided, United States provided funds to European economies which were devastated by war, and also, helped those economies to develop. This was the Marshall Plan. Then post World War II, trade was, trade boomed in most of the states. So that shows that how technological advancements and policy shifts and more collaborative relationships could help in developing the trades. So this is what happened after the. So this was the emergence of the rule. The political commitment was there. The company, institutions, the states agreed to commit to international trade. So that brings us to uh, the very first rule based, what we're talking about, rule based system, economic trading system, was GATT, General Agreement on Trade, Tariffs and Trades. It was established in 1947 by 23 countries in Geneva. Okay, 1947 by 23 countries. So it was established. GATT was established, and it came into effect in 1948, January 1948. When it came into effect, people, it was enforced and it came into action. So it was a direct outcome of the Second World War. Efforts to, after the Second World War, there were efforts to have international economic order so that people could collaborate with each other and come out of their own silos. Okay, so it was part of an effort based on cooperation and have open markets so that every, people can do businesses in the other countries. Earlier, people from one country were not allowed to do business in the other country, so the markets were slowly opening after that, moving away from protectionist policies, because those protectionist policies also gave way to Great Depression. Remember, after the Second World War, there was also Great Depression, which caused economic havoc in the countries. So, GATT was conceived as a provisional arrangement, to supersede. It was a provisional agreement, right? And the idea was that eventually a more comprehensive specialized agency would be developed by the United Nations, right? For example, and then that was the International Trade Organization. But International Trade Organization was never, it never materialized. There were always disputes, or I'll say not disputes, but the member countries did not agree to certain terms and conditions, and eventually it did not materialize, and GATT continued. GATT was the primary international agreement governing body for for quite some time, almost 50 years, 5 decades. So the GATT's purpose was to promote international trade by reducing or eliminating trade barriers between countries, like there are tariffs, the quotas, etc. The main preamble of GATT itself said that, it said that the aim of GATT was substantial reduction of tariffs and trade barriers and elimination of preferences on a reciprocal and mutually advantage basis. So no, there wouldn't be. So GATT also said that there wouldn't be any preference given to any particular nation. So these were the rules, or the what you say, the underlying ideology of GATT. The It reflected, the conscious consensus among the allied powers that open trading system was important for economic growth. They agreed, the allied powers after the Second World War, they agreed that an open business or an open trading system was good for economic growth and prevention of future conflicts. So, what are the foundational principles of GATT? Non-discrimination, most importantly. So that is the most pivotal principle of GATT, that trade without discrimination. So this was operationalized through unconditional most favored nation clauses. So there wouldn't be any meaning that any tariff reduction or trade advantages granted by a member country to one trading partner was, immediately extended to all the GATT members. So all the GATT, if there are there were 23 countries in GATT. So if one of the countries had any tariff reduction or any trade policy for one particular country, it was obviously extended to other 21 countries as well. So there was no preferred nation. The ideology was to prevent discriminatory trade practices among the countries, and have equal market access for all the participants, for all the 23 participating countries, and protecting the interests of smaller countries, because the bigger countries could collaborate and the smaller countries could be left behind. So it was to make sure that everyone was at the equal footing, and weaker countries were more, it also protected the weaker countries against the small powerful ones, as I said. Now another objective was, to of GATT was to achieve trade protection through protection through tariffs rather than through import quotas or trade restrictions. So GATT sought the elimination of non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers were quotas or trade restrictions that, you cannot send. Trade restrictions could be that you cannot go send a certain, one state would say that you cannot send a certain good to my country, or I will not sell certain goods to your country. So those were this, or quotas, that only this amount of a particular good can be traded among countries. So these are non-tariff barriers. GATT wanted to remove them, and therefore it thought that it will be done through tariffs, which were like more so these non-tariff barriers were less, I'll say, less transparent and more difficult to negotiate, and tariffs were more like, set rules and regulations, which was easy, everyone would know. There was transparency in tariffs. There were other general rules also in GATT, which like the establishment of uniform customs regulations. So there would be customs in every country. So the regulations have to be uniform in terms of trading, across border trading, and each nation had to each all of these 23 nations had to agree to those regulations, and each well, if one country wanted, requested to reduce the tariffs, then the other countries should, they could negotiate the tariffs. Basically, what it meant, that the participating countries could negotiate the tariffs with each other. So there was something called an escape clause in GATT, which meant that member countries could modify agreements, these sets and rules and regulations, if their domestic producers experienced losses as a result of trade concessions. So, suppose a particular country, suppose India is taking lot of, I'll tell you, escape clause. So, I'll give you an example: country one and country two out of those 23 nations. So country one is taking, it has reduced tariffs and made business easy, and there's an open market. So country two is sending some particular product X to country one to, they're trading. So they are selling, their country two is selling product X in country one. And because of reduced tariffs and easy trade, cross border trading rules, they are going, country 2 is able to sell product X in country 1 at a very competitive pricing, which will affect the producers of, or yeah, producers of product X in country 1. So they will be affected, their business will be affected. So that's called an escape clause, wherein the country one can change the rules, the tariff rules, and the business rules to protect the businesses in their own country. Protect, for this particular example, protect the manufacturers of product X in their own country, because their business is getting affected as other country people are able to sell them at a very competitive pricing. That's called the escape clause. Now, GATT evolved through a lot of negotiations. It was not that they decided in 1947 that we are going to give a, make up something called GATT, and then within few months they came up with the rules and regulations and started, enforcing it in 1948. That did not happen. It evolved through various rounds. Basically, 7 rounds of, 7 rounds of negotiations happened over a period of, say, 47 to 50 years. 7 rounds of negotiations happened. That was throughout the lifespan of GATT. GATT was there for only 47 years. After that, it was taken up with other things. So, 7 rounds of negotiations happened. There were multilateral trade conferences, which were these rounds were multilateral trade conferences. These rounds served as forums for extensive negotiations to further tariff reductions, address other trade issues. There could be trade issues because of technological advancements. Cold War was happening. Then there could be new product developments, etc. So there could be complications, trade complications, which were discussed in these trade, what do you say, rounds, negotiation rounds. So between 1947 and 1993, 7 such negotiation rounds took place. The key negotiations were in, few. One was in Kennedy round in 1964, 67, which reduced the, drastically reduced tariffs on industrial goods. Then there was the second most important was the Tokyo round in 73, 79, between 1973 and 79, which addressed the non-tariff barriers. There were still very many non-tariff barriers, and it addressed those issues. Then there was the Uruguay round, 86, between 1986 and 94, which achieved tariff cuts, which obviously discussed tariff cuts and expanded the scope of trade rules to newer areas. So earlier it was only to industrial goods and other goods, but it expanded to newer areas like medicals, services, etc. So these rounds were very helpful in liberalizing the trade, opening the markets in different countries. Opening of market means that every country, the countries could, all these 23 countries could operate in each other's market without much hassle, without much rules and regulation. I mean not rules and regulations, but without much restrictions. It was becoming easy. The average tariff on industrial goods was reducing. So that was very good for trade. And the trade liberalization happened in this area because of GATT. But there were certain limitations in the GATT, and then people were, and because of these limitations, people were asking for a stronger framework. So, despite the, they were, GATT did receive. It's not that it was a failure. It did have a lot of achievements in tax reduction, tariff reduction, and promotion of a rule-based trading system. But it was a provisional legal agreement. Remember, it was supposed to be a provisional agreement, and it was supposed to be replaced by International Trade Organization of United Nations, but it did not happen. So it was not a fully fledged international organization, and it presented limitations. Its capacity was often criticized. People often criticized its power and capacity and its effectiveness in dispute settlement. They said that it was not very effective in settling disputes among trading partners or among countries, and and so it was less robust, and because it was provisional, it was not permanent, and the dispute settlement process was very slow. That's what people said. The disputes were settled through panels and it relied on political will. The dispute settlement relied on political will rather than having rules and regulations to settle these disputes. Now, also the scope was said to be very narrow. GATT scope was said to be narrow because it was confined to trading in goods. It did not address the growing importance of, the newer coming areas like services, intellectual property rights because of technological advancements, and agriculture trade, which became agriculture trade was a reason for friction among many countries, right? And the scope was narrow. These issues were not discussed, and therefore there were not many mitigation rules for issues arising up because of this. So as the economy diversified, the global economy was diversifying. Uh, there were many portions of this international commerce which were outside the framework of GATT. Now, GATT also faced challenges in resolving intra-Europe trading issues in the 1980s, 1950s. Remember, there was the blocks, there were regional blocks where, so because of the challenges, there was something called a European Economic Community was formed. Because GATT was not able to solve the issues, a European Economic Committee was formed away from GATT. All the European countries formed this. So that showed that it was not GATT was not good enough in solving the challenges of European countries. More, so these issues were not, it was challenging for GATT. Another was growing complexity demanded a robust, formalized, and comprehensive institution. So again, the business was expanding. Initial status was to be replaced by ITO, which did not happen. So a more formalized organization was needed, and hence WTO, World Trade Organization, came into being. It was replaced by uh, World Trade Organization. So, in short, the limitations of GATT were temporary nature, narrow scope, less effective dispute agreement mechanisms. So, these were all sorted out by World Trade Organization. Right. So, from GATT to WTO, what was the shift? How did that happen? Um, in the Uruguay round, during the Uruguay round, permanent broader institution was after the Uruguay round, a permanent broader institution came into being. So during this round, which started, happened between 1986 to 1994. The most it was supposed it was this particular round was said to be a very ambitious and comprehensive round. It There were extensive negotiations in the foundational agreement, and then during this round, and that's when the agreement for World Trade Organization was reached. So that was a profound transformation in global trade organization. So on in 1995, world WTO was formally established as a permanent intergovernmental organization. It had its own headquarters and its own dedicated staff. uh, this was a transition from GATT, which was, again, as I said, was a provisional agreement, to institutionalized trading. So that was the shift. And so by the time GATT finished, or GATT ended in 1995, there were 75 existing members. GATT had 75 members along with all the European communities. So they all became founding members. All these 76 members became members of the World Trade Organization, WTO. So it had an expanded scope. The scope expanded to goods, services, intellectual property rights, and agriculture. All these issues that were not addressed by GATT. So that was a key distinction. GATT focused on reducing tariffs on goods, whereas WTO, was looking more about, it extended to goods, services, intellectual property, agriculture, and investment facilitation between states. So that's when a general agreement on trades and services came up. That was the first multilateral agreement on liberalizing international trade in services, and covering most, and it covered most of the service areas. What are the service areas? Medical, education, banking. So it covered all of that. Then there was the agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, which required the member countries to comply with minimum standards of intellectual property, including patents, copyrights, trademarks. Because of technological advancement, this was necessary. Then there was the agreement on agriculture, which had fixed rules for international agriculture trade, like trade distorting subsidies and setting limits on agriculture tariffs. All these things came up. So, what was the structure, functions, and decision making in WTO? The WTO's governance structure was designed to facilitate multilateral decision making, so that everyone could be a part of it and have an oversight of, a global oversight. The major supreme decision making authority was with the body called the Ministerial Conference, which which still convenes every 2 years. Once in every 2 years, this particular ministerial conference convenes. It comprises, it has representatives, from, like, economic or trade ministers of all the member countries, WTO member countries. It is responsible, this particular ministerial conference is responsible for overall functioning of World Trade Organization, like, deployment of specific councils, appointment of director general, and also changing of rules and regulations in WTO. And decisions are generally taken by consensus. Then there is the General Council, which is responsible for handling the WTO affairs. It multiple capacities, like the Green Council for routine matters, dispute settlement body is there overseeing compliance related conflicts. Trade policy review body is there, which scrutinizes the trade policies of the member countries. Remember, in GATT there was this escape policy, where escape rule, wherein countries could change their policies if they feel that their business or their internal economy is getting affected. So these there are different councils in the WTO. There was also there were many specialized committees, also specialized councils and committees in WTO. So, what were the responsibilities of WTO? It serves as the primary global forum for negotiations among members aimed at further reducing barriers to trade. Okay. Whatever could be the non-tariff barriers, reducing the non-tariff barriers. So there's this Doha round going on. So now the WTO also has rounds of negotiations. The present round of negotiation is called the Doha round, which aims to strengthen the world trade system and further ahead with improve more market liberalization. Then apart from negotiations, WTO also has to monitor the implementation of its rules, regulations, frameworks, agreements, etc. by the member countries. Because rules and regulations, once made, they have to be implemented also. People have to see if they are being implemented or not. So this takes place through review of notification. So it monitors the member states and sees if they are following the rules and regulations or not. Then it also is dispute settlement mechanism is also very important of WTO. So it settles disputes between member countries concerning if there's a breach of agreement, etc. So these are all settled by multilateral. They are dedicated multilateral bodies which handle these disputes. And this particular dispute mechanism is more effective as compared to what it was in during GATT. So, what are the core principles and agreements of WTO? It has a multilateral trade system, as I said, and is built upon several foundational fundamental principles, as we discussed there. Some we had an idea. Now, let's look into them in detail. One is non-discrimination. It was there in GATT also, that the most favored nation treatment mandates that only trade advantage conceded to one trading partner must be immediately and unconditionally extended to every other WTO member and its nations. So the national treatment requires that imported goods should be treated no less favorably than domestically produced goods once they have entered the market. So these the non-tariff barrier would be dealt with. Then we have reciprocity. This system operates on the premise that mutually granted concessions in trade negotiations should be balanced and of equal weight. So it encourages participating countries, the 76 participating nations, and ensures that they receive gains from liberalization. It shouldn't be that one party is gaining and the other is not. So everyone should have a balanced gain or balanced benefit. Binding and unforceable commitments. So the tariff commitments made by WTO members in the negotiations and the trade negotiations are legally binding, okay? And they enumerate in schedules of concessions. So a country can change its bindings. As I said earlier in GATT also that was there, but only after negotiating with its trading partners. So a country cannot just so this negotiation may involve compensating them for loss of trade. It could be anything, right? So as I said, the countries can change the rules and regulations if their internal trade is getting affected, but there has to be negotiations for that. They cannot just get up and change the rules and regulations. And so that is there. Then transparency. The World Trade Organization members are obliged to publish their trade regulations, maintain institutions allowing for the review of administrative decisions that affect trade, and respond to requests for information by other member states, and notify changes in trade policies. So there has to be transparency. All the participating countries or the member countries should share information and be transparent. And as I always said, as I said before also, that when sharing of information happens, then countries can the countries can develop more trust among them, and the relationship develops and strengthens. Then there are safety values. So the World Trade Organization's agreement also includes provisions that permits governments to restrict trade under specific circumstances, such as to protect the environment, protect public health, animal health, or plant health, etc. So, for example, there's some product which is causing harm to the environment or to the health of the people, then the member states can stop the trade of that particular product. We keep seeing that many countries sometimes say that a particular product is unhealthy and they stop its trade. In past few months back, there were some Indian spice brands like MDH, etc. They were flagged for having products like their spices had certain elements which were unhealthy or not good for public health. So many countries like United States, etc., they banned the use of those products, or the import or the trading of those products. So these things happen. Now, what were the, so World Trade Organization is built upon a foundation of various agreements. Okay, as I say, because you need to have a lot of agreements, rules and regulations happen when people or when countries agree with each other, right? So, there are legal framework which these agreements form the legal framework for international trade. These agreements have happened through a lot of extensive negotiations among the member countries. So, some of the agreements is General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. The purpose of this is it was founded in 1994. It is a foundational agreement for trade in goods. Okay, its aim is to reduce tariffs as well as non-tariff barriers for trade, and promote non-discriminate and provide a framework for trade negotiations and dispute settlement for goods. Basically, it is for goods. Reduce the tariffs, take care of the non-tariff barriers, most favored nation and national treatment principles, as I discussed earlier, should be taken care of. So trade negotiations and dispute settlement in terms of trade and goods can be handled. The major idea is to lower the tariffs and eliminate obstacles that allow goods to flow freely across borders. Then next is General Agreement on Trades and Services, GATS. Its idea was to extend principles of free trade from goods to services and recognized the importance of the growing service sectors in the global economy. So it defines four modes of supply. For example, for services, modes of supply for services is cross-border supply, communication abroad, commercial presence, and movement of national persons. So this is called part of the services. Then there was the agreement of trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, also called TRIPS. Its main aim was to ensure that national laws provide adequate protection for creators and innovators, facilitating international trade in technology and creative works, and also making sure that the public interest is taken care of. Then, lastly, is agreement on agriculture. So here the whole idea was to bring agriculture sector under the trade rules, because it was not there earlier in GATT, and which caused lot of disputes, and have a fair and more market oriented trading system, so that people who are in the agriculture sector don't get affected, negatively affected. So now, these four agreements were basically what was always said lagged in GATT. So, these were four. Apart from these four, there were other agreements as well. One is called the Anti Dumping Agreement, which allowed countries to counteract unfair pricing practices by foreign firms that could harm the domestic countries. Remember, uh, GATT had escape rule or escape policies. Similarly, it's called the anti-dumping agreement, so that the domestic industries do not get affected. Then agreement on technical barriers to trade, wherein preventing countries from using technical requirements product specifications, packaging rules, etc., as forms of uh, trade barriers, right? So not protectionism. Remember, protectionism was something people did not want after the Second World War. So, it was on you stopping protectionism and making, or you say, non-trade barriers. Then agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which aimed to balance a country's right to protect health and environment and avoid arbitrary or discriminatory trade restrictions based on health concerns. Then next is agreement on government procurement, which aimed to increase transparency and competition in government purchasing, promoting fair access to foreign suppliers. So, when government purchases something, they generally prefer their own goods made in their own country. So, the whole idea was that fair access to this government purchasing should be given to foreign suppliers as well. So that was the core principle. These are some of the core principles of WTO. Now, we looked into this. So this is all that we looked into, right? Anti-dumping, agreement on technical, etc. So, what is the impact of WTO on global trade and contemporary challenges? What are the contemporary challenges? So, what are the achievements and the challenges? Uh, WTO was built on the legacy of GATT. Okay, and it has been instrumental in reducing average tariff levels globally, contributing to the growth in world trade since its inception in 1995. So, average tariff levels for GATT participants was 22% in 1947, but it was reduced to 5% after the Uruguay round in 1999. And and that is attributed to the shift that GATT was doing from the shift that was happening from GATT to WTO. Now, Doha round of WTO, which was launched in 2001, aimed to strengthen the world's trade system. It pushed for greater market liberalization and improve the integration of developing countries into global economy. There were a lot of developing countries to help them into develop into a global economy. Uh, Trade facilitation agreement, which was adopted in Bali in 2013, was a very major outcome of this particular policy of WTO, which streamlined custom procedures and among countries, and which will reduce the trading cost between the participating countries. This was all the Doha round. But still, WTO also has some criticisms and challenges, you can say. So, the WTO has experiences slowdowns. The Doha round has experienced slowdowns in recent years because of agricultural subsidies and market access. This has led to perceived stagnation in comprehensive multilateral trade liberalization efforts. The slowdown has coincided with also with the contribution to proliferation of bilateral, multilateral, and regional trade agreements that have got affected, sometimes also referred to as the spaghetti ball effect. So they're all getting affected. So the because so that is one of the effect. The regional trade is getting what do you say, proliferating uh, this whole international trade, and that is getting affecting. Then there's also rising protectionism happening in the participating countries. That is also, and digital economy disputes are happening because it's a digital economy now. There are a lot of disputes happening, and WTO is still not, I'll say, advanced enough or developed enough to manage these issues of digital economy. So the global trade architecture is changing. Uh, Now, non-tariff, right? So then there's called the appellate body deadlock, which is no dispute settlement system is also getting is not very effective right now. So this appellate body deadlock has happened since 2019, which has caused operational challenges to WTO. This the binding and enforceable committee commitment principles, which is a core tenet of WTO, is also getting affected because of the appellate body deadlock. Now, these are some of the key differences between GATT and WTO. You can get a question on this. If you just make this chart, if it's a 10 marks question, you definitely get 3 marks. Right. Now we'll see how the international monetary and financial regime has grown over a period of time. So it starts with the Bretton Woods system, right? Uh, let's look at the architecture, aims, etc. of Bretton Woods system, which was from 1944 to 1977. No, sorry, 1971. Now, in July of 1944, the World War II was raging, so it was at its peak. Delegates from 44 nations came together at Bretton Woods in United Kingdom, and the goal was to design a new international monetary system. The primary aim was to ensure the exchange rate stability, so that how do we compare the currencies of different countries. So there should be a stability in exchange rate, prevent a return to the competitive currency devaluations seen in the seen in the interwar area, and foster global economic growth. So if there's a rule and regulation for currency evaluation, then global economic growth can happen. This initiative or this meeting was a response to the bitterness among nations that happened after the Great Depression. After the Great Depression, people were really worried. There was this economic meltdown, so they wanted something very something more secure. So the architects at the Bretton Woods thought that okay, we will the gold standard, the rigidity of the gold standard would be given up, abandoned, because it was not very good, and international cooperation was not happening. So, what happened? Gold standard before the World War I. There was a gold standard. The currency valuation happened based on the amount of gold they had. So that gold standard was abandoned after the First World War, and there was no international cooperation also after World War I. So people wanted a more a more comprehensive and more a system that was more based on cooperation. So there was a new system coming up, and the main intellectual architects of this new system were Keynes White, the two scientists, John Maynard Keynes. He was the advisor to the British Treasury, and Harry Dexter White. He was the chief international economist in the U.S. Treasury Department. So basically, the Treasury Department of Britain and U.S. were the uh, main brains behind this. So they proposed a clearing union, global central bank that would issue new international currency to settle international imbalances. Right now, his plan was to discourage both deficits and surplus among member countries. No country should have a deficit or a surplus. And they also wanted a stabilization fund for a finite pool of national currencies and golds, so that people but the all these policies were more aligned to with the what do you say business interests or economic interests of United States. So these two minds and the whole committee, 44 nations discussed, and International Monetary Fund was finally established. And International Bank of Reconstruction Development was also established. Now, International Bank of Reconstruction Development is now part of the World Bank. We will see that later. Right. So the system that they established was, a fixed. It was a fixed system, but also had adjustable exchange rate regime. Member countries could, peg their currencies to the US dollar within a 1% band, and the US dollar in turn was fixed to gold at $35 per ounce. So the whole responsibility of maintaining dollars convertibility to gold relied on United States, and that made United States a very it made the dollar the what do you say the linchpin of global monetary system. And so dollar was the what do you say the yeah, the central axis around which every other country had to set their own, value their own currencies. So this particular system became functional in 1958, and that's when the currencies could be converted. Earlier it was very difficult to convert currencies like dollar to pound, pound to dollar, rupees, etc. It was not easy because there was no underlying rule. Now with this underlying rule, remember, simple rule, they had to every country had to peg their currencies to the US dollar within a 1% band of the US dollar, and US dollar was fixed at to gold at $35 per ounce. So this was the system. So this particular system was good. It worked for a couple of decades, and because there was it worked because there was very less international mobility at that particular point of time after the First World War. Remember, there was very less international trade between countries, so it worked fine at that time. It did not affect much. It did not affect the global trade much. So basically, the success of the Bretton system was not because, it was not a function of its economic design, but dependent on specific political conditions in that era and the prevailing distribution of global power. This design positioned United States dollar as the central reserve currency, and it reinforced United States economic dominance over others. You know, that's why, you can say that is when the United States started becoming the became the center stage of power and dominance. That's how it started. But eventually the system collapsed. So how did it collapse? There were initial success, but then by the 1960s, there were, damages or cracks started happening, and it completely collapsed in the by the early 1970s. The primary factor was United States deficits. United States was having balance of payments deficits because it had lot of expenses. It was funding the Vietnam War. Remember the proxy wars I told in the last session during the Cold War. So Vietnam War was one such proxy war, and United States was directly involved in it, and it was becoming very expensive. It was funding the war. And also, United States was developing this Great Society domestic social program, wherein it wanted to develop the lifestyle, upscale the lifestyles of people in its own country. So for that, there were a lot of developments happening domestically in United States, which also led to, there could be the economy was very affected with all these expenses that United States was going through, and there was high inflation also in US. So an over evaluation of dollar happened, and so people were not really the confidence in the convertibility to gold, the $35 per ounce of gold, that was not, people were not confident in that convertibility because the US economy was unstable. And since US was the issuer of the reserve currency, US faced a dilemma whether to maintain the dollar's gold convertibility, but to do that, it had to curb its deficits by, uh, it had to, look, take care of its expenses. Which, but if it did that, there were other things that will get affected: the war and the Great Society expansion. So the now there was a rapid growth of private cross-border capital flow in the especially in the euro dollar European market. So that also posed a challenge to fix the exchange rate system in that particular area. So these flows facilitated speculative attacks against currencies, making it increasingly difficult for countries to maintain their parities. There were a lot of cross-border capital movement, so it was getting difficult to maintain. Countries were getting difficult. It was difficult to manage the exchange rates. So these were all thing. Then any hint of possible devaluation would trigger capital outflow. So, if any country showed that there was a devaluation of any particular currency, then people will start taking current capital out of that particular country, and then trade will get affected. Simply, if you see that the economy of a country is going down, then people will start closing their businesses in that, and then the capital will flow out. So the economy would get affected. So the system also suffered from insufficient mechanisms for multilateral surveillance and adjustment. So deficit countries often delayed necessary devaluation due to political repercussions, and surplus countries enjoyed trade competitiveness advantage, and they had little incentive to revalue their currencies. So these were all there was an imbalance because the deficit countries were not evaluating or devaluating their currencies, and the other countries, the surplus countries, were also not evaluating. So that was a problem. These were some of the factors, because there was not enough regulations in place. Surveillance was not there. Remember, surveillance really, when you have a rule, you need to have a way to make sure that that particular rule is being, you need to monitor to what extent that particular rule is being adopted by countries. Now, the next was the Nixon shock. So in 1971, there was something called as the Nixon shock. The United States President Richard Nixon, he suspended the convertibility of dollar into gold. He said we're not going to do that, and this closed the gold window. So he said that no, we are not going to do that, and he dismantled the whole Bretton Woods Accord, the entire Bretton Woods exchange rate system. He dismantled that. It was, so so people did not know how to evaluate their currencies, since the dollar was the what you say, the linchpin or the axis around which everyone, all the other countries evaluated the system. So the entire structure came down, and there was chaos as to how they are going to evaluate their currencies. So, formally in 1976, there was something called Jamaica Accords, where Bretton Woods system was subsequently ratified. These accords officially allowed the price of gold to float with respect to US dollar, right? So it was not stopped at $35 per ounce, but the rate of gold will flow with respect to the US dollar, and other currencies established a more versatile international monetary system was established, and so there was a change. After this, there was a change. Now, so what happened? What are the characteristics and implications of flexible exchange rate regimes? Because after this, as you say, the exchange rate regime became flexible. So why? Once again, understand why did this happen? First of all, it was fixed with US dollar, etc. But then, when United States was facing deficits because it was into war and other issues, it could not change. The United States was faced with the dilemma of how to change the system, how to affect the system, because its own economy was collapsing. So that's what in then President Nixon, he just said that we are not going to follow the Bretton regime because my economy is getting affected because of that. Now there won't be a fixed gold rate regime, but there would be a floating gold rate regime. Now, so following the breakdown of Bretton Woods, the countries were not obligated to maintain a fixed price for their currency against gold or other currencies, right? So, fixed price. Now, you see the currency, if you check the currency values, it keeps changing. So, there are multiple factors behind that. There is no fixed currency rate. Today, it could be, say, suppose Indian rupee against euro. Today it could be 90, tomorrow it could be 89. It keeps changing because of multiple factors. So, The countries were not regulated to maintain a fixed price for their currency against gold or other currencies. Instead, the national currencies began to float, and their values determined by market demand and supply. A significant advantage of floating rates uh, is that they grant central banks of particular countries greater autonomy over domestic monetary policy. Now, the central banks of particular, so Reserve Bank of India, and similarly, you have other central banks in other countries. They have more, power or more autonomy over the domestic monetary policy, as they are not there's no fixed monetary policy, there's no fixed exchange rate that they have to follow. Okay. So they can pursue domestic economic objects. The central banks, like, they can control inflation or promote employment without being constrained by exchange rate targets. So see, uh, the same problem happened with United States. They had to control their inflation, but then they had an exchange rate target, because of which they could not. That's when Nixon said that Bretton Woods is not going to be in place. So, this flexible system provides a crucial buffer against external shocks, as the exchange rate can adjust to absorb. The exchange rate can be, adjusted to absorb these imbalances. External shock could be anything. It could be political instability. It could be something like a pandemic, or it could be something happening in other country. It could be a business system, a company, a huge company. Say tomorrow Microsoft shares go down, then the whole economy gets affected. So the central banks can change their exchange rates to absorb those imbalances that keep happening regularly. Right, so this is it. But flexible exchange rates also introduce considerable volatility and can lead to a phenomena like exchange rate overshooting, where exchange rates adjust more rapidly and excessively than the underlying economic fundamentals. So there are certain economic fundamentals as well that have to be followed. Now, this volatility can create uncertainty and challenges for businesses, investors, governments. Remember, I said earlier that businesses thrive well when they have a certainty in the environment, right? But so these sometimes these exchange rate volatile, flexible exchange rate can cause uncertainty for businesses to function. Now, smaller economies with substantial trade sectors therefore opted for various forms of managed floats or pegs to reduce this volatility and have more, what do you say, more certain economic environment and uh, in their systems. Now, the collapse of Bretton Woods and widespread shift to floating exchange rates served as a powerful illustration of the impossible trinity. So, what is the impossible trinity? It's something in international finance. It's an economic principle that says that a country cannot achieve three political goals simultaneously: fixed exchange rates, free capital mobility, and an independent monetary policy. So the United States, facing domestic inflation, inflationary pressures during the Vietnam War, and the Great Society programs, confronted an increasing private. It was confronted by private capital flows, right, and and it prioritized monetary autonomy and capital mobility. So this was inherently necessitated the abandonment of the fixed exchange rates. Because of this, they had to abandon the fixed exchange rates. Uh, then comes the globalization of finance and its consequences. What are the drivers of increased capital mobility and its dual impacts, benefits, and risks? So, they have been in the past few decades, you can say, we have witnessed this, drastic change or transformation in global capital markets. It has led to unprecedented, increase in the volume and mobility of capital flows across borders. Now, this globalization of finance is driven by a confluence of factors like rapid advancements in technology, which have lowered the cost of processing information and executing transactions because of technology. Financial innovations, that including development of sophisticated uh, derivative products and the widespread liberalization of international capital transactions by many countries. Many countries have liberalized their markets, which has removed impediments or barriers to cross-border businesses. Now, this has resulted in a global capital market that is, uh, it is not very well integrated, but still very much more interconnected, right? Because of all these globalization, the markets are more interconnected. So the benefits of increased capital mobility are, huge, humongous. It contributes to greater efficiency and strength in domestic as well as global financial systems. It facilitates a more efficient allocation of financial resources. In the most you can allocate your financial resources in a better way, especially during periods of market stress. Now, market stress, even pandemic saw a lot of market stress. The wars also caused a lot of market stress, and it can help smooth the business cycles by allowing households and firms to borrow abroad when incomes are low and repay when high. So now capital mobility also expands opportunities for portfolio risk diversification among alternative assets, enabling investors to protect themselves against country specific shocks. The countries might also have shocks based on various factors. They could be civil wars, they could be inflation, or they could be floods, climate related issues. Now, the ability of investors to move funds across borders in search of higher yields or greater security imposes greater market discipline on policymakers. Now, they have to have more discipline. Now, encouraging better macroeconomic management and risk management as well. Now, but then there are certain risks also. Now, increased mobility also carries, it can lead to sustained misalignments in exchange rates. There could be misalignments, and exchange rate overshooting can also happen where market movements diverge from economic fundamentals. Now, this can create uncertainty and challenges again for traders and investors, and the rapid and large scale movement of capital across borders can make economies vulnerable to capital outflows. So all of a sudden, if people start, if you've seen, Dubai has made very easy for people from other countries to buy properties in their UAE. In Dubai, buy properties there. So people from various countries might want to buy properties there. Now, if suppose many people from India start buying property in UAE, UAE will have a capital inflow, right? But from India, the capital will go out. Right, so there will be a huge capital outflow, and which can cause a financial crisis, right? It does happen in a lot of emerging markets. So we are an emerging market. India is an emerging market. So that if there are no proper rules and regulations in place, and there are not, then it could lead to a global financial crisis as well. Now, the evolution of the international financial architecture. Um, so, the international monetary system evolved over a period of time and broadened to something called international. So earlier it was an international monetary system which looked at the finances and capital flow, etc. Then it expanded to something that is called international financial architecture, which reflected a wider scope of reforms beyond the traditional exchange rates and international monetary funds. Lending to it encompasses comprehensive crisis prevention and crisis management system. It was a response to the recurring and increasingly contagious nature of financial crisis that emerged in the 20th century. Later half of the 20th century, you can say. A lot of so the primary reason was the crisis, currency, banking, and debt crisis in the large emerging economies like the Mexican debt crisis of 1982. Then there was the Asian financial crisis between 1997 and 1998. Then the crisis in Russia in 1998, Brazil 1998 to 2002, Turkey 1999 to 2002, and Argentina between 2000 to 2001. Now, all these global then there was the the major global financial crisis of 2008, which underscored the need for systematic reforms, demonstrating that financial instability in major industrial countries could rapidly, it could spiral, or globally it can have a more global effect than expected. So these reveal the these crises showed that how interconnected the global finance was, and the country specific responses were not adequate enough. So the reforms under IFA, they expanded to include the development of international standards and codes for data transparency, banking supervision, and corporate governance, as well as the implementation of early warning systems and improved design of debt contracts, including collective action clauses. See, because your businesses are doing, are operating globally. Take any business, Reliance or Tata, or they have partners globally. They have their businesses globally, so they need to follow the rules and regulations and transparency of every country. They cannot, so the IFA put all that in structure. So it was an architecture system. It was not just a monetary system, but it was an architecture. It was a financial architecture, or a framework, a financial framework that everyone had to follow. So there were a lot of global forums like G20 and Financial Stability Forum that emerged after this, and it involved larger so now these forums involved larger emerging economies and discussions like India, China. They were involved in the decisions and discussions and decision making on architectural issues. Architectural issues here means financial architectural issues, reflecting a broader recognition of their systemic importance. Now, these countries, they were growing economically, their business was growing. So these emerging, many Middle Eastern countries, initially they were not involved in the when international monetary system happened. They did not have much say in the decision making, but now they were actively involved because these countries play a very major role in the international economy. Now we will stop at this only first. Right. So the evolution of the international financial architecture, it demonstrated a clear progress from a reactive approach. Earlier, it was a approach focused on managing individual country balance of payment crisis, which was the IMF's initial so International Monetary Fund, their initial mandate that was there to manage the individual countries, and now it shifted to a more proactive strategy aimed at ensuring systemic financial stability. That's what financial stability and preventing crisis across the global economy, particularly in emerging markets, because it was found out that one particular, even the developed countries might not get affected, but the emerging markets, the crisis happening or any event happening in emerging markets does affect the entire financial economy. The factor driving this shift was the recurring and increasingly contagious nature of financial crisis happening, which highlighted the deep, the interconnectedness of global finance and the inadequacy of the purely country-specific responses. I'm just, summarizing what I said. This also reflected that more sophisticated understanding of financial stability, has to be, developed, and financial stability was no longer, an option, and it was a global public good. The financial stability was important for the betterment, global public betterment, I could say. The broader implication was that the global financial governance was becoming more comprehensive and integrated beyond, merely providing liquidity, or to, and now it encompassed regulatory harmonization, enhanced surveillance, very important, and early warning system. Surveillance was very important to make sure how the companies and the countries are operating, and there are no financial frauds happening in any place, in any of the entities in the of the international financial architecture. Why? Because again, one fraud, suppose there is one, let's go to Sri Lanka. There were a lot of financial misappropriations, and the country had to finance. Eventually the country collapsed, and they had no funds. So what there was no proper surveillance. So if there had been surveillances in place, no, we really need to see. That's a different case study altogether. But lack of surveillance caused the collapse of the nation, and then that particular collapse did not just affect that particular country, it affected many, countries globally. So, enhanced surveillance, early warning systems, etc., have to be in place. Uh, Now, there could be persistent challenges in achieving international agreement on correcting policy weaknesses in major industrial countries. What are the major industrial, the developed countries? That power symmetries continue. So, still the power asymmetries continue to shape the reform and agenda, and the distribution of responsibilities for maintaining global financial stability. Uh, still it lies with the developing nations, and emerging economies are sometimes ignored. So this was it today. Actually, the next is International Monetary Fund, which is a big session. It's a huge thing. So we will start that in the next class. Um, You can stop the recording. Okay.